calling all comrades, calling all lovers, lying awake in the pre-dawn. I know we are scattered, but we are many, and we are stronger than we know.
Hello, this is Jeff Thomas with 15 Minutes of Fame. Thank you to those of you who are watching, as I'm sure this will be an interview you do not want to miss. I am a member of a very particular generation who has had the privilege of experiencing and understanding the digital world we live in today. But I can remember a world before YouTube, Spotify, and Meta. It was while living in this world I walked into a Tower Records in 2002 and bought the album Sorry Thank You. It was an immediate and meaningful connection. Advice to a Lover, Pedestrian, and Disarm would be some of the songs that would resonate with me still to this day. The only downside to discovering Unbelievable Truth's music in 2002 was the band disbanded in 2000. I had to come to terms with the idea I might never hear new music from such a talented band. Until now, 25 years later, it is with great joy that I welcome Unbelievable Truth to our little platform that could, as our guests, Andy Yorke and Nigel Powell, two members of Unbelievable Truth, join us here today. All right, hey guys, how are we doing today?
Very well, thank you. It's
Very
later
good.
in the morning for us than it is for you, so
Well, excellent. I just want to thank you so much for coming on to 15 Minutes of Fame and speaking with us today. Give us some insight on your experiences on the road with Unbelievable Truth. Got a few questions for you here. I just wanted to kind of go over with you guys. So, for starters, you're all back playing shows, touring, and getting that quality gig time together once again. You just finished a leg with Soul Asylum, and now you're gearing up for a headlining tour in Europe. What's it like to be back in the mix of the touring atmosphere again?
I think it's probably more better for Andy to answer that in a way because I've played a lot of gigs in the interim. You know, we've been away for a while as a band, but I've been doing other things, so I've played a lot of gigs.
Sure.
So it's not so unusual for me. Andy?
Yeah, I guess I haven't really. Well, I've barely played any shows since 2008 when I was doing gigs for my solo album. We have played like we did play one or two shows as Unbelievable Truth, I guess, after that. But yeah, so I've almost been out of it for more than 15 years. How does it feel? Kind of interesting. I guess I've been watching my kids grow up, and they're quite into singing and music and performing rock music as well. They're like 11 and 13 now, and so they've been with school and outside of school. They've been sort of doing little playing songs in front of people, and I guess I've been watching them going, this is lovely, and also I want to be doing this again. Kind of, why am I not doing this? So yeah, I sort of I guess I wasn't always completely comfortable, right, playing shows before, and quite nervous, kind of stage fright, imposter syndrome. These things were problems, and I don't know. Something about being older and wiser maybe means that this time around, those things might be still there slightly, but it just feels like I've got things more in proportion, and I'm able to actually just kind of enjoy the experience of playing shows. And so, yeah, this time around, it just feels much more natural. and much more unambiguously positive, really.
That's great to hear. And I was kind of chuckling when you talked about your kids kind of inspiring you to get back into it. I used to be very involved in music 20 years ago and took a long hiatus, and was my kids finding interest in, some of the music that they listen to that kind of drove me back to where I would eventually do this as well. So I can completely relate to being inspired by our kids' inspirations as well too. So touching on your time with Unbelievable Truth in the late 90s and 2000s, you amassed quite the loyal following and fan base from your success then. And you also gained a little bit of an audience afterwards by earning a sort of cult following during your inactive years. How has the response been with regards to some of the loyal members of your fan base who are seeing you play again now in 2025, and who may have been fans of you, in the 2000s as well?
It's been really nice reconnecting with them. I mean, a fair few of them obviously we knew personally. There were people who'd come to the gigs from the very beginning, who whose names we recognise, and who um, have kind of we've had interactions with over the years, through Andy's solo stuff or my solo albums, and I mean, generally, I think the reaction has been mixed between thank goodness for that and it's about time. So
Yeah, I can definitely relate to the it's about time, being one of the people who like it's about time. I was
yeah, I mean,
very happy.
it wasn't there was nothing deliberate about us not doing it not doing it for so long. But then there was nothing ever really deliberate about us doing it in the first place. In a way, we made music, but between the three of us, Jason isn't here today because he's got a responsible job and he's at work. Um, but between the three of us, it was always so natural and organic. You do have to be a little bit more kind of regimented when it came to dealing with the industry and that kind of thing, which I'm sure we'll get onto. But in terms of being in a band, there was never that sense of we've got to be in a band to make music to become famous. It was like the three of us would be in a room together, we'd write music, and so as not to make that a completely onanistic act, we would then record it and try and see if people liked it. And it wasn't really more planned than that. And then not doing it, we were friends. Andy was reticent about continuing, so I was like, well, all right, we'll do other things. And then when it seemed right, we came back. That was a long rambling sentence for not much gain.
No, it was a very great answer. It it has. I can tell you there has been like a about time feeling of seeing it, and I know that you guys, um, you took a break from 2000 to 2023, but you guys actually did come back together and play a couple of shows in between that time as well for this, that, and the other couple reunions, so to speak. So I really like what you said. It doesn't matter if you're calling it this thing or if it's just you guys in a room just making music together. It sounds like that cohesive energy's just kind of always existed between you.
Yeah, I think so. It's just there was never an argument that we have had to overcome to come back together, or kind of any distance between us personally. It was, there was a club in Oxford called the Zodiac, which was closing down, and they got together some Oxford bands in 2007. Was it 2007? I think so, something like that. Um, to play the last night at that club, and they asked us, and we were like, yeah, sure. We did it between the three of us, and we played a couple of friends' birthday parties who said, "Will you play a gig for us?" Um, So yeah, it's been nice and relaxed. And I think also leaving it so long before we've come back together to kind of do, you know, actually put something out, it's made it feel like another another debut album in a way because it's been such
Hmm.
a long break. In
Yeah,
That's how it feels to me because when you make your first album, you've got like a big wodge of experience that you're kind of all putting into one thing, and we've kind of recreated that later in life.
yeah, absolutely. And that's actually a unique perspective that I kind of want to touch on a little bit as well, in regards to, you know, now versus then thing. But I also wanted to talk about the Citizens Band EP. So the full album is now available for everybody to hear today.
Today.
Um, yeah, this very day, this is when everything's released to the public. So it's a very dynamic, it's very diverse, and it's just absolutely beautiful collection of music. When coming together to write this new music, did you feel like you were expanding on the progression between almost here and sorry, thank you? Or do you feel like it's been a complete departure from then and an altogether new experience, but with familiar faces? Kind of what you were speaking about just a moment ago, Nigel.
Andy, what do you think?
I think it feels. I'm quite surprised by how different it feels from the music that we were making before. So, like generally speaking, when I listen back to what we did before. Almost Here sounds incredibly cohesive, um, like a single body of work, right? With a single mood, um, and really quite comfortable with itself. Whereas, Sorry, Thank You, I would not say is like that. I think it's got some nice songs on it. Some really interesting and different songs, a different atmosphere to it than Almost Here, definitely. Some of it is yeah, quite claustrophobic seeming and not entirely comfortable with itself, I would say, that album. And then when you look at Miss Music, so some of the kind of B-sides and outtakes, I guess you'd call it. Uh, that's such an interesting mix of uh, some beautiful stuff, right? That I think I was down on at the time, like Nightlight, for example. And then some other things that kind of show the sort of warts and all aspect of being in a band and writing songs, right? I think some of the stuff on there is, I mean, yeah, you listen to some of the songs and think, yeah, there's a nice idea there, but it hasn't really quite taken off. So then fast forward to what we've been doing the last year or two, and it just feels what's remarkable about it, I think, is it just feels like so much more, I guess, a bit like the first album, but like more accomplished, more kind of, yeah, we're doing this, and there aren't any more questions. There's no question marks here. It's kind of like these are all statements, uh, and I guess it's just to do with us all maturing, and like Jason, Nigel, definitely maturing through still being in the industry all this time, or still actively being in bands all that time, all those
Mhm.
many years that have passed. But for me, I haven't been doing that, but I guess I've been maturing in other ways, maturing my outlook or whatever, and maybe a little bit more yeah, as I said before, a bit more comfortable in myself and able to believe that, yeah, I can actually do this. And that all seems to, for me, it comes through in the new sound that we're making.
I really like that answer. I think I hear what you're saying in that the EP just it sounds like a one full body of work, and there's definitely a maturity to what you guys are doing. It still sounds very much like an unbelievable truth work, but there's just this different energy and atmosphere to it that it almost feels more of an epic, so to speak, of like, each song is one part of a bigger story, and then you move to the next song, part of a bigger story, so on and so forth. And
I'm glad you
I
feel that.
think,
That's
yeah,
good.
it really it feels like it's just one full collective story that you're telling, and that was the thing that really kind of resonated with me with listening to the entire collection together as one body. And touching on the songwriting experience then versus now, we kind of talked about that a little bit as far as like the feel of everything. I want to kind of go into the analysis of some of the songs specifically. If you don't mind, I would like to start with the title track, Citizens Band. So I'm not saying that Unbelievable Truth has never played the piano in songs before, but there's a different element to how it's played as you open the album with this fluid, arpeggiated piano composition. And then you've got this lyrically and melodically profound, it's almost like a soothing call to arms. If it's contradictory in like it feels like very motivating and action affirmative, but it's also with a peaceful lullaby quality to it as well. Can you tell us a little bit about what motivated this unique and effective approach to coming to writing this music?
Um, I'm not sure we ever think about things in unique and effective ways, unfortunately. Our writing is extremely organic,
Mhm.
um, and not really. I mean, it's kind of the initial idea is never really thought through. It just kind of appears. So that particular um, musically, that particular piece, we were writing at Andy's house, and it was about dinner time, and Andy went up to see if dinner was ready, and I was just noodling about on the piano, and that thing came out, in the
Wow.
2 minutes between Andy going upstairs and him coming back down and saying, "It is ready, it's chips," or whatever. Um, uh, I had that, and I'd recorded it on, as a voice note on my phone, just so I wouldn't forget it. And came down and I played it to everybody, and everybody went, "Yeah." And I said, "Jace, you play that there. I think that'll be cool." And um, as often happens, Andy came out, I think, wordlessly with the kind of um, either some or all of the melody at that point. It was like, okay, that's done. So it took about 6 or 7 minutes to to write
Wow.
before
Wow.
Andy went away and came up with the lyrics. But I mean, but I agree with you about before Andy talks about where the lyrics came from. I agree with you about the kind of feeling of it. What was the phrase you used? A calming call to arms or something like that?
Soothing.
Yeah. Yeah, is very motivating with a lullaby quality is
Mm.
how I felt. Like I was just like, yeah, but this is so nice.
Yeah.
You
Somebody commented on the video that it sounded like starting a revolution with a whisper,
Mm.
which I thought was also a
Yeah,
good phrase.
absolutely. That's another great way of putting it, in fact.
It's
So yeah,
interesting,
so
isn't it? Like, sorry, go.
go
Oh,
on,
no,
Andy.
you please.
I, I was just going to say it's interesting, Jeff, because the way you described it was like that's very articulate. And when I hear that, I'm just thinking, yeah, God, it does sound like that. It does do those things. It is a soothing call to arms, but then, yeah, the answer to the question, how did you make it? What were you thinking when you made it? And the answer is really mundane and kind of it's about dinner time and chips and um, but
And
I guess
noodling
that's
around on the
the
piano before.
yeah, that's the sort of that's the dare I say the magic of the process, I guess. And you should be writing our marketing copy.
I think also that there is the thing that unless you're a particularly narcissistic human being, I think if you approach something by going, I'm going to write a soothing call to arms, it's absolute death. You're going to go nowhere. It's going to sound like chest beating rubbish. And I think that kind of soothing call to arms thing, if I can repeat that phrase a few more times,
Sure.
um, it, that comes. Um, let me wind back slightly. What a lyricist who I really loved is Mike Skinner from The Streets. Do you know The Streets? Have they made it to America much?
No, but you know what I'm gonna do right after this is over?
I mean,
I'm
they're
gonna be
they're,
checking
they're
that out.
very very different to us, but
Mhm.
the thing about his lyrics is um, they they do that expert thing of achieving generality through extreme specificity. So, for instance, it's kind of he's a rapper basically. It's almost
Mhm.
rap. It's interesting stuff, and it's quite snarky in places. But there's one of his songs which called "Could Well Be In," which talks. It doesn't talk about love in general, but it's an incredible love song because it talks about a very specific moment sat opposite somebody in a pub, and thinking about watching TV with them and stuff like that. And I think that that's a better way of reaching people is by that's what I get from Andy's lyrics is that he writes about talking about you in the third person while you're sat just there. Um, he writes things that specifically mean something to him in a certain way, but because he kind of reaches the kernel of meaning in that, it can apply itself when you listen to things in your life, that have nothing to do with that specific moment, but speak very clearly to feelings that perhaps you can't even articulate inside you. So, and I think with Citizens Band, that's the thing. It's might be talking about insomnia and introvertedness, but actually it can talk about revolution at the same time.
Absolutely. If I can echo that, I really think that there's a responsibility to sometimes kind of hold some of that stuff close to your chest a little bit because the meaning can be something completely different to the listener. You can be writing it and say like it's about this, but when you hear it, and you think about, the volatility of the state of things from one place to another, you have I'm not bringing up politics. I'm not, but like when you look at you know the political climate of a place, such as one place or another, and uh, it, hearing something that might have been just a very personal internal thing to you, it could mean something on a global perspective to people who are going through some really difficult times, whether albeit something completely unrelated to the source of the material, and it just kind of relates to them in that way.
Mm.
So I absolutely agree. You can write something that's very personal, but it can also be very personal to the listener in a completely different way. So I think that you've kind of captured that with Citizens Band, particularly. Just yeah, it can, I think it can resonate very well with a lot of different listeners.
Well, Andy captured that with Citizens Band. I just showed off on the piano for 2.5 hours.
Well, but to kind of talk about, the value of, your organic composition, how everything just kind of came together, it really, it's has a lot to do with the soothing aspect of the delivery of that song lyrically, just listening to that piano just come in, with this just very soothing arpeggio that just it moves in a way that I touched before. You guys have obviously used piano before in some of your earlier work, but just in this way, I just when I heard it, it's the very first thing we heard from Citizens Band, and the very first note that's struck is this piano just coming in with this arpeggiation, and it's just like wow, like this is a such a great direction, and to touch on the new direction of the music, it's very, like I was saying, it's very recognizably traditional unbelievable truth, but it's mixed with so many great expansive ideas. And you touched on a little bit with Citizens Band, but as far as the production process, I was thinking more about moments like in Non-Combatant, where you incorporate the bridge with, is it a woodwind instrument? Is it actually an instrument or is it synthetic? There's like an oboe sound in the middle of Non-Combatant.
The oboe sound is an oboe.
Oh my God, he does have ears.
Yeah, it's a real one as well. We got a proper musician in to play some stuff.
Wow, yeah.
But yeah, I've never used an oboe before in any of my arrangements. I've arranged for a few instruments, but there was it actually came from the because we have completed an album as well as the EP, which is coming out later in the year. And
What?
there was a song particularly on the album where I heard a section with oboe, and since we were getting somebody in to record that I kind of began wondering if there was any other bits they could do, and I thought that would work in non-combatant as well. So it did.
It really did. It was so cool how you're going it. You have very very much have this band groove, and then it just hits this really interesting bridge, and that melody just it kind of takes over. I just thought it was so neat, and then the acapella introduction to the song as well. There's just been some trickles of these really amazing ideas and sounds that have just been coming out of the music, and I just think it's been extraordinary to hear and see changes, but it also still sounding, for a lot of Non-Combatant, it sounds just very it sounds very experienced. Like you guys have said, you still get together and you've been playing music for now, over 30 years. And so that relationship really comes out in the music. And it kind of gives you this chance to experiment with some of these things that people aren't doing.
Yeah, I mean, Andy can talk about this more, but I get the feeling. Well, one of the things through the EP and the upcoming album is I think Andy's interest in layered harmonies has suddenly kind of gone through the roof. It used to be I just used to add a harmony or two, but Andy suddenly seems to have gone. Is that right, Andy? It seems to be something that you've really engaged with heavily.
Yes, I don't really know where that came from, but I accept that. I guess it was in a way, there were moments, but back in the day with Almost Here, where there would be a little bit that I'd be listening to the song and I would just start hearing another part. I can't remember examples, but building. We ended up doing that part on strings. So yeah, in a way, I think that's the sort of origin of it. So but I listen to things, and the harmonies just kind of come to me, and then it's like I can't not hear them. And so yeah, I think that it sort of came from that, and then just getting a little bit of confidence that I could actually come up, suggest these ideas, and the harmonies will the harmonies that in my head, they will work. They don't just, like, when you actually try and do them in practice, they're discordant, or unless I meant them to be. And so I can do it, and just getting excited about the fact that I'm capable of producing these things. I just started running with that, really, and layering up more and more harmonies, and also playing around with experimenting with intervals between notes that shouldn't really sound good, but if you do it with conviction, sometimes the discordant
Absolutely.
intervals can kind of work after a while. And there's a bit of that in Citizens Band as well, right? In the harmonies, where there's a couple of moments where you're like, what, really? They actually wanted to do that? Oh yeah, it kind of works.
I think there's something telling about that. As a musician, it's very easy to, hear common progressions, common melodies, and, you kind of operate under these rules. And I think it's a very particular moment where you try to explore outside of those rules and see what works, and you find out so many things do, and things that you're told even don't, or are not supposed to, end up working very well. And I think you guys have found some of those things that are outside of the bounds of like a bobby chord progression, that just tell these really interesting and different stories from the musical aspect of things. And I really think that's particularly true with Citizens Band, and just some of the stuff that you've been doing with these 4 songs. I really love it. So today, as we said earlier, the full EP is out. You've been promoting new music for a few months now, and it's now here for the entire world to hear. So what are your thoughts on promoting music today versus promoting in, say, the pre-digital era?
That's an interesting one. I mean, partially the answer is I've got no idea, because you do your best, but I don't even know what it's based on nowadays. I don't.
Yeah.
I'd love to, as you say, the EP's out for the whole world to hear. I'd love to reach the whole world, but I don't really know how we can do that quite, without losing who we are, or making it so we don't want to make music anymore. I mean, it's kind of a double-edged sword, because right now it used to be that the one of the biggest issues that any band had was distribution. Back when we started, being able to get a record in front, into shops or in front of people, such that they were able to buy it, that was a real hill to climb. There were gatekeepers everywhere. Whereas now, it's anyone can do it. It's you can be in exactly the same storefronts as every other all the other biggest artists in the world, and that's not a barrier anymore. But promotion, I think the former gatekeepers of the distribution world have tightened their grip on gatekeeping promotion in a way, because they know that the other side of it has been democratized, and the making of records as well. If you've got a phone, you've got enough software to make a record nowadays.
Mhm.
So that is also completely a level playing field. If you've got a good idea, there's nothing to stop you making the record that you want to make. I mean, a lot of it seems based. We take advice on promotion really, because that's not our area of expertise, and I don't want it to be. You end up having
Mhm.
to interact with it nowadays.
Yeah.
But my preference would be that we develop our expertise in making good music, and only that, because that's really the most important thing, is that we can make something great. But we end up having to, social media does seem to be the main tool for getting a name out there. And that doesn't
Yeah.
just mean posting, it means knowing how to advertise on social media and push yourself that way as well, in ways that are cost effective. I mean, I don't know. I'd much rather there was some superstar DJ on a radio station that everybody listened to, who falls in love with us and plays us 3 times a day, and then everybody knows who we are. But it's not how it is anymore.
Well, there are gatekeepers for that as well, aren't there? Right? It's
Yes.
not. Yeah. I mean, generally, yeah, the odds are stacked against anyone, and so you have this enormous pool of people trying to make it, right? And I don't know how many people, how many bands and artists are out there on Spotify with like 800 plays or less, and of those people, what percentage are good?
Yeah, absolutely.
You tend to assume, I don't know, I think I tend to assume, I don't want to speak for anyone else, but I tend to assume that 99.9% of that stuff is going to be awful. Maybe that's really unfair. But it's kind of humbling for us to be kind of right back, effectively right back. It's a debut album, or debut release in a way, in that sense, that we're kind of pretty much right back where we started. We've got a small loyal fan base, right? But outside of that, we kind of we're not signed to a major label anymore, and we don't have that machine behind us. And it's kind of humbling to be back in that position, and it's sort of making me rethink my prejudice about all those many bands out there who have got tiny followings. There must be a few. There must be a good few very accomplished musicians with something to say in that enormous pool.
I think, yeah, I think I looked up the statistic once upon a time with Spotify as it relates to all of the artists on Spotify. I think it's a staggering percentage, like 90% of artists on Spotify have 50 monthly listeners or less, or something. It might even be more than 90%. And I think this kind of talks about a little bit about what both of you just said, in that it has been democratized. It is much easier to make music, but it doesn't mean it's any easier to make it in music.
Mm.
In the 90s, you just needed a producer, somebody to walk into the right club to hear you play and, think I can market this, and that's how it was done. But today, to make it in music, there are a lot of labels. Being in Nashville, I'm right off of Music Row. There's a lot of for rent for sale signs down that road, and they've been pretty regimented on who and what they're signing now. And a lot of times, the very first question that's asked is, "How many followers do you have?" So it's, you're again what Nigel was saying, and kind of what you were saying too, Andy. There's this will to want to be a musician. Why can't I just focus on that and doing that alone? But you're almost kind of pulled into becoming a content creator as well too, in addition to doing the things that you do. And I feel like maybe it brings a lot of people out of their comfort zones because in my experience, the better the musician, the more introverted they typically are. um, Especially me personally, like I'm not very good in front of a camera, if you can't tell. But it it kind of drives you. You have this thing that means a lot to you that you create and you want to put it out there in the world. And you know now you have this way that you have to follow, and then it just really almost can kind of sometimes pull away from the experience of creating the music. But so I think it's interesting that you guys get the chance to really see that. And Andy, you kind of touched on how it feels like you're starting over in a sense, and it's just kind of mind blowing. You guys are a band who's charted, like in the UK. You had songs and albums that have charted on Billboard, which is something that most hardly any independent artist can have the experience of saying that. And it's crazy to think that you guys feel pulled in this place where you're starting over again, but it's true. It's the world we live in. It's
Yeah,
crazy.
I mean, but to try and put a sunny side on it, um, at
Thank
the
you.
very least, at the
Boo
very
and
least, I
dark.
feel like we're starting over with an amazing EP and an amazing album on the way. So, and uh, I've always thought I've worked with people who are focused on doing something that has commercial viability before, which always seems strange to me because with the volumes of things, the most likely outcome for any band, including ours, is abject failure. And if you do something that if you tailor what you're doing to be a commercial venture, and you think the music's all right, but you don't like it that much, and then you're an abject failure, then you've got nothing. At least if you've made an album that you really love and think is amazing, and you're an abject failure, you go, well, the album's good though. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the most important thing to remember is the sunny side point that you just brought up. Is at the end of the day, focus on you know putting out something that you're in love with and that you're proud of. And I think because if you try to be commercial, or if you try and follow a trend, you're going to end up following this thing, and you're not ever going to really find that voice that you're really looking to put out there. So stick to the music, stick to what you're proud of, and stick to what you're trying to accomplish. And if really, yeah, for most bands, it doesn't end up happening. So why concern yourself with that? Just do what you love to do, and if it does, does, and if it doesn't, it doesn't. It's very philosophical way of looking at it. Thank you, Nigel.
Yeah,
Um,
kind of.
yeah.
Although I'm slightly self-contradictory there because will still work as hard as I possibly can to get our music in front of as many people
Mhm.
as possible. Um,
Sure.
because I want people. I want to go. Look, this is a great album. Come on. So
Yeah,
oh,
absolutely.
there we go. Um, Anyway, do you want to leave it on a kind of positive point there?
Yeah, I have one last question, and then we can wrap it up if you guys are okay with that. So I know you guys have a headlining tour, first headlining Unbelievable Truth tour. And what is it, 25, 20 years, 25 years? That is
25 years.
awesome. 25 years, first headlining tour that you're preparing. Uh, in some of the dates, it looks like you're kind of around most of like West Europe. Is that correct?
No, it's just the UK.
Just the UK. UK. Okay. And so are you looking at other touring options beyond that after this tour, or then are you going to be kind of focusing in on uh, production for the album, or what's next after the tour, I guess?
Well, the album's finished, so
Oh,
thankfully
great.
we're not thinking
Yeah.
about that.
No production for that. Yeah, good.
Um, there's going to be a few festivals and things that we're doing. Again, it's all in the UK over the summer, and then another probably similarly sized tour when the album comes out in the autumn or fall, as I believe you call it over there.
Yes, the fall.
Uh, but it's one of the realities of being slightly older and not being signed to a major label is that we have to juggle it around work now.
Mhm. Yeah.
Uh, so that becomes an issue about scheduling tours. I don't, outside of me, I don't think anybody is particularly fond of the idea of just jumping on a bus for 6 months. But we probably would tour a little bit more if we had if we weren't constrained by outside forces. And
Sure.
we would love to go to Europe. We'd love to come to the States, but we have to do things in a way that is not going to be financially crippling. So those things aren't necessarily going to happen soon,
So
unless
yeah, it's about waiting and seeing like what kind of momentum we build, right? And how the album does, and maybe if things start to take off with that, then we'll be looking at touring outside the UK at that point.
Other places.
Yeah.
It'd be really nice to see you guys play some different things. I know one of the videos on YouTube I wore out was your performance on the Jules Holland show. It was, because it's one thing to listen to somebody's record, but when you hear a band that you like, first thing you think is, man, I want to see them live. And I think one of the lovely experiences about the Jules Holland show for many artists has been how they capture how a band is live. And I've just always had the opinion that Unbelievable Truth would be a very great band to see live. So I'm very thrilled for the people in the UK who get to experience that. I wish I was one of them. Maybe something will happen and I can wiggle out a trip to the UK or something and see you guys. That would be great.
or maybe we can come to Nashville. I've been to Nashville lots of
Hey,
times.
yeah,
There's some great venues there. So
there are some really great venues that you guys would be more than welcome at, and I would do everything in my power to pack that place for you.
well, that's very lovely. Thank you, Jefferson. It's been a lovely conversation.
I couldn't agree more. Thank you, Nigel. Thank you, Andy, so much for taking the time to speak with me today. Um, very last thing, do you guys have anything that you want to quote unquote shout out before we sign off? Anything that you want to talk about that's upcoming?
Yes, Andy.
I wanted to say, because you were talking about Unbelievable Truth as a live band, and I went to see Nigel's other band recently, the exact opposite, and it was a rare opportunity for me to actually just watch Nigel play, and because normally he's behind me, but
You
I
don't
was
have
just
eyes in
blown.
the back of your head?
I was just blown away by his playing. I'm just and by the exact opposite. It's just Nigel and my other guy sounding like a full band, and yeah. So I want to shout out that everyone should check them out because especially if you get the chance to see them live, it's pretty phenomenal how they pull it off. Just the two of them.
Now we're going to have to come to
Absolutely.
Nashville as well. So
Yep. There you go. You could just all come collectively. That would be great. But yeah, I really love the energy that each one of you bring on the stage. It's very fitting to the music that you play, and I love how you have this very amphibious sound that can be alternative rock music and also like folk and almost really more acoustic and roots driven, and you just have blended these things, and you use things in a way that nobody thinks of. You know, a lot of people like to incorporate strings in their songs, and Unbelievable Truth have and have always incorporated strings in their music, but you do it in a way that, you know, a lot of people like to do like a chamber sound, but you might just have like a solo string musician just echoing in some of the stuff, or an oboe in the middle of a song, you know, just these different things. You guys have a unique element to how you play music. And I think that that is more staying power than anything that's out there. And you were talking about how a lot of music is just kind of bad, or it's just not very memorable. I don't think that that's something that you would ever be able to say about Unbelievable Truth, because you just hear it differently. And it's just been such a privilege to be a fan of your music for so long, and to be able to actually hear you guys kind of talk about the process of how you make it. This has been a truly humbling experience. So, on behalf of the member of one of 15 Minutes of Fame, I just want to thank you so much for taking the time to do that with us today.
well, thank you so much.
Thank
It's
you.
been a pleasure.
Absolutely. Well, I hope you guys have a great rest of your day. I'm going to get mine started at 6 a.m. and you
Go
guys
back to
are
bed.
about ready for lunch. So,
Excellent. Well, thank you
but
so much. It's been really lovely.
yes, it really has. It's really been a great chat with you all. So thank you.